everyone, and welcome to Functional Fertility, the podcast designed to demystify your hormones, up-level your lifestyle, and supercharge your fertility potential. I'm your host, Dr. Kalea Wattles, and today I'm welcoming my friend, fertility acupuncturist Michelle Oravitz, to talk about connecting to our inherent wisdom so that we can awaken our natural reproductive vitality. Let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. She is an acupuncturist specializing in fertility. And her story is so powerful because she found her love of Chinese medicine after it helped her through her own menstrual cycle challenges. And this actually inspired her to change her career from architecture to acupuncture. How powerful. Michelle has been on a mission to help women get pregnant through her one-on-one work and her acupuncture clinic, as well as an online. She recently authored a new book called The Way of Fertility, which I've had the opportunity to go through. It's such a beautiful and amazing resource, and it dives deep into the energetics of fertility through the lens of ancient wisdom. It's so unique and blends science with these treasured traditional treasures. So welcome to the show, Michelle. We're so happy to have you back, actually, for your second appearance on Functional Fertility.
Kalea, thank you so much for having me, and it's always fun talking to you.
You and I go way back with our podcasting. I did some research and I was on your podcast all the way back in 2019. So you and I have been podcast friends for like 5 years now. And it's always so fun connecting with you. You teach me so much. And you have this new book coming out. I'm so very excited for you. And I know you've poured your heart and all of your clinical experience into this book. And I was thinking about the process of what that must have been like for you, combining your personal experience and all of these anecdotes from your patients and really thinking about every aspect of our fertility, including kind of this mind, body, spirit component. And I imagine as you were going through, there were things that were coming up for you and you were thinking, I wish I would have known this. I wish someone would have told me this, or I wish that I would have even known this earlier on in my career as a practitioner. Are there some things that are at the top of your mind that you could share with us that you wish more people realized when it comes to their reproductive health?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. But one of the reasons why I felt so strongly about writing this is because I sort of, I went through it myself and I'm like, this is what, like, everybody should know this. And I don't want anybody to not know this. And basically, I think one of the biggest things is really even younger, as I was younger, really not listening to myself, not listening to my body, not allowing myself to be aligned with truth, and sort of shutting down my own self-expression to help others feel comfortable. And it was always kind of putting myself in the back burner, not really giving myself that self-love and self-care. Also, not listening to my body when my body was telling me it was hungry or tired or whatever it was. I mean, there was even a point which you'll find this really surprising in college where I smoked cigarettes. And it was like not all the time, but still, like it's shocking. So it was definitely not something that, of course, I would ever do now. And I completely shifted from what I was back then. And another thing is, for 12 years, really from 12 years, from the time I was 13 up until about 25, I didn't have regular periods. And I thought that my circadian rhythm, like everything about my personality or my habits or my patterns was going to be that way forever. And I even remember growing up thinking, hearing it from my mom saying, a person's born the way they are and they're going to be like that forever. And I remember thinking, God, I don't like that. That doesn't feel good. And I'm like, I don't want to like a life sentence to my habits and my limited self-belief, like I don't want that. And so I remember when I started learning and reading and finding out that you can actually empower yourself and you get to create yourself, your life. I mean, you have a choice in it. And I think that one of the reasons people don't do it is because they don't know they can.
I think you're absolutely right. And as a girl mom, I know you're also a girl mom. What a powerful opportunity to have to shape a different experience for our daughters, for our patients, for our community. It's just, I'm doing all this research about genetics right now. And similarly, how we say like your genes are not your destiny. Your family history and even your own early menstrual history does not have to be your destiny. You have a say and you're an active
Yes.
participant in that trajectory, right?
100%, 100%. And I think looking back, if you think about it, is it really the genetics that causes a repeat of diseases or, conditions in a family? Or is it the culture, the food, you never know what it is because there's certain behaviors, certain emotions that are passed on. So it's not just genetics that are passed on.
Yeah, that makes good sense to me. And as you were talking about, what you wish people would know, it really this theme of just awareness, body literacy, connection to your own symptoms and health. That's really what was the takeaway for me. And in your new book, you tell us a powerful statement, which is awareness is your superpower. And I love that. I felt really aligned with that. But there's two sides to this. The empowering part where you're aware and that knowledge is power, but there's also this side where the early stages of awareness can make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. It can really have the potential to stir some things up. Will you talk to us a little bit about that experience of when we might need to dig into that discomfort?
Oh my God, yes. And 100% such a good question and such a good point because just think of it this way. If you have a closet and you see that closet, and every once in a while you have to go in the closet to drop something off or to put something away, and it's a freaking mess, right? So you like to keep it closed and you just kind of, but every time you go past it, some like a little energy leak comes out because you know what's behind it, but you don't want to deal with it. And if you have to go there and go through all of the things, it's a lot of work. It's uncomfortable and it takes a little extra time and energy actually to do that. So because it makes you aware of things that you might have not been giving attention to for a very long time. So when you do that though, you start to have more functionality in your life. You feel more clear, things have a place, it starts to make sense. And so that work up front sometimes is really worth it if it means being truthful, kind of like sitting in your truth. And I think I like that word truth. I mean, you think of truth, it feels almost like energetic, like cleanse. You almost feel like it's shining a light, a bright light on what's really real. And I think to myself of the time that I was on birth control for so many years, on and off birth control, and given really the diagnosis or not the diagnosis, the treatment plan that included birth control pills in order to have a regular period when I had off periods. And I remember thinking like, this doesn't make sense. It never made sense to me. Never felt aligned in my body, but I went with it because it was just what was given to me. And the truth is, it is not aligned in truth. It's not real. Like you're telling me I'm going to get my period every month. We know that it's not a real period. It's fake. So I was basically given a fake thing. And I think about that and how much we sort of will take on, what are things that we're willing to put up with. Those are things that are basically like apps in the background that are just draining your energy, draining your energy. So yes, it's uncomfortable, but ultimately it's going to clear the way for more vitality and you're going to feel more alive after doing that.
I'm thinking about sometimes when we start to cultivate an awareness around our lifestyle factors and how they can contribute to our symptoms, and how sometimes that requires us to go to hard places and to take a hard look at the truths of our experience. And, even if we look at menstrual pain, because that probably is really relevant to this conversation, and how sometimes then we have to look at, okay, well, what's going on with our diet? And, are we having a little bit more wine than we would like to? And are we moving our body? And oftentimes the things that are revealed when we start asking those questions are hard because
Yeah.
we have to radically shift our priorities, which can be painful or it can be triggering or it can be anxiety producing. And ultimately, we know that's moving us closer to the goalpost, but dang, is it hard in the moment?
It is really hard. And yeah, there's no getting around that. I mean, it really is hard to look at yourself. It's really hard to question your thoughts sometimes, like, is this really based in truth? Am I doing this because it just feels good, but I'm not really thinking about like, so if I used to like to drink for social anxiety. I felt anxious when I was talking to people. So I was like, okay, so am I doing things for the right reasons? Every choice you make, is it for the right reason? Or is it a crutch? Is it sort of like not an addiction, but sort of an addiction in the sense of something that makes me feel better? But is it a good feeling better? Like, it's not like exercising where that makes you feel better, obviously balanced exercise. Or so it's asking yourself, am I really aligned in my body's integrity or my soul's
Mhm.
integrity, my truth? And that really ultimately can be a lot more effortless, believe it or not, than it seems like it at first. And one of the things there's certain tools like meditation helps us connect with that. It helps us connect with our inner voice. And one of my patients, she's been coming to acupuncture. She's also been meditating, and she's finding that she's craving proteins more, and she's also wanting to move more where she wasn't exercising in a while. And I'm like, that's it. You're making the connection. Your body's communication is a lot stronger now. And she's, through acupuncture, through meditation, through body awareness, it's coming natural to her. So that alignment and that awareness doesn't have to be painful necessarily, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. In the flow, you're in your flow because it's
Yes.
aligned with your goals. And along those lines, a lot of my patients will tell me, I've known that I needed to make these changes for a while, but I just didn't have a good reason. And now that I'm ready to try to get pregnant, all of a sudden I have this really important motivating factor.
Yeah.
So I can anchor into this big goal that I have, and it makes some of these changes a little bit, like you said, more effortless, or at
Yeah.
least it's worth the effort because you know what outcome you want. Do you find in your clients that when someone decides they want to get pregnant, that they have a little bit more willingness to go to those hard places and to ask those uncomfortable questions?
Oh yeah, they are so motivated. They're so compliant. Like, I love my patients. I mean, they're the best people to work with. I mean, they're so dedicated. And sometimes I almost want them to dial back so they can feel ease with it, and not to be hard on themselves, and not to check off all the lists, and because that could be another level of pressure, to try to do all the right things. And so that's where that self-care, that self-love comes in, that grace that you give yourself, and to not have to feel like you have to be perfect, and also to not do all of it all at once. You can increments, with ease. So if it means that somebody who, like, I've had some patients who overexercise, and that was their way, that's always been their method of release. So I try to give them a couple of substitutes in addition to still exercising, but little by little with ease, so that they don't feel like their body almost doesn't feel threatened, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be gradual.
I think that's a really good point. With exercise or with the wine for social anxiety or whatever it is whatever your behavior is, sometimes I'll have this conversation of you have a stress coping mechanism and you've been using it regularly because it worked for you. Of
Right.
course, you're going to go to the thing that gave you the results that you were hoping for. That makes sense. But now you have new goals. And so maybe that behavior is no longer working in a way that serves you like it did before. So now we have this opportunity to explore other things. But you just reminded me, like the way that you're talking about this, that's so supportive and so nurturing. It can be helpful if you have a practitioner who's willing to go to those hard places with you because it's hard to go it alone. And if you have
Hmm.
someone who will let you know, like, I'm not scared to go to these places with you. We can do it together. How powerful.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it feels so much better doing something knowing that you have support than doing it alone.
We all need that support. Behavior change happens in community. And even if your community is you and your practitioner and that strong therapeutic partnership. But I really respect this conversation and how you talk about it in your book, that awareness is our superpower, and sometimes we have to move through that initial stage, which is a little bit uncomfortable, but the benefits on the other side are so worthwhile. So um I really
Actually,
believe that.
there is one thing that I wanted to mention. One of the things that really inspired me along the way, because I feel like I've had like little glimpses of teachers, and Pema Chodron, who's she's a monk. I don't know if you've heard of her before. I'm sure
Mhm.
you have. She's very big on meditation, written a bunch of books, and she actually her husband left her, and she ended up being a single mom, and she retreated into meditation. That was like her way, and started to learn Buddhism, and that was her way to really find and go through all of the pain that she suffered. And she one time was saying, after all of this, after even learning meditation and learning this whole new lifestyle, she went on a retreat, and she was in a group with a group of people, and this one lady just didn't like her, and she would be like, oh, I don't know why she doesn't like me, and she kept trying to like make conversation with her, like try to engage her, and the girl just she didn't like her, and she was like, I don't understand. And she just kept like trying to make it work. Like started feeling like anxious. So she ended up going to the chapel or an area of meditation, and she just sat there. I don't remember if she talked to somebody and somebody said, go and meditate, sit with it, or something like that. Or she just figured that out. That I don't remember, but I do remember her sitting with that discomfort. And it was so uncomfortable. She sat there with that feeling of rejection. She sat there with that feeling of fear of not being part of a tribe, or, all of these emotions came in. All of a sudden, it dawned on her everything she's ever done in her life has been put in place to avoid that feeling. And if you think about that, we try to be our best. We try everything just so we won't get rejected. People, girls want to be pretty. Just all of the things that you see in the magazines, and that's considered like great. Or you try to overreach with work, and like, and just everything that we put ourselves through, like all of the pressures, just so that we can feel loved. We're looking for that feeling and that acceptance. And I found that so fascinating. And she just sat through it, and it literally, like, she felt it melt through her body as she just sat. She allowed it to be. So that was really like eye-opening for me.
And how uncomfortable to have to come to this realization that your whole life you have made choices motivated by being worthy of other people's affection and approval, and having to move through that. That is hard. That is
Yes.
painful.
Yeah.
Along these same lines, while we're talking about hard questions to ask, there's another one that you talk about in your book, and I knew that I had to ask you about this because I have so many patients and they're struggling with their fertility. And as we're talking and I'm getting to know them, what emerges is sometimes a belief or a question, or I don't want to say insecurity, but maybe an uncertainty that they are worthy of parenthood.
Hmm.
And that is an extremely painful thing to realize, is that you're not sure that you are deserving of this beautiful gift. And there's a whole mindset around that. And so in your book, you suggest that we ask this question: is your heart really open to having children? And I read that and whoo, I had to sit with that for a minute, because what a targeted question and thought and opportunity for self-exploration. Tell us a little background on this. Like, how did you come to this question? Is this something that you ask with people, and what type of responses do you get in your patients? Because this one was really stunning to me.
Yeah, I don't actually use that question. A lot of what I was writing, I was very moved to write, and it felt like one of the things, because sometimes the question doesn't necessarily say a statement. It's not saying you're not, but isn't that an interesting thing to do or to ask yourself? Like, it's a curiosity, and that's where, a lot of that awareness comes from a place of curiosity. And if there's a trigger from that question, then why not look at that? What would that be? Because some people would say, of course, like, but there's also, there are definitely things that the subconscious kind of keeps score on. And if there is maybe a perception, and I've seen this actually, I guess it was brought up from some things that I noticed about my patients, because as they would tell me stories about, like, one, for example, her father was very mentally abusive to the mom, maybe even physical too, and kind of looked down on her, had this like lower perspective of her, that she didn't have an education and just sort of that she wasn't worthy. And so my patient actually had a very high education, and she took her job very seriously, almost like, and she shared with me that she didn't want to be like her mom.
Mm.
And you wonder, is there something within you subconsciously that's rejecting a mother, if that makes sense? I mean, that was the question that came to my mind. And I didn't say that because I wanted to be very sensitive and I wanted to allow her to feel free and open to express herself. But it was more me as a practitioner, it was more my observation of really sitting with that curiosity, like, what's happening in my body? Am I really open? Do I feel fear? Do I feel like what's going to happen when I do conceive? Some people are afraid, and I've heard this too, like, these are fears that I've heard. They're afraid that their partners are no longer going to like them because they're pregnant, or that they're not going to be as close, or they're not going to have the freedom that they had before. So it was more just kind of an opening. Sometimes those hard questions are very powerful. And so it is hard to ask or to pose that question, but it is something that is very powerful. And especially if there's a reaction, that reaction should be looked at further, because it just reflects whatever is going on inside of us on an energetic level, and what we will also believe to be our potential.
Right. Well, as I was reading this, it prompted me to kind of reflect upon my own personal experience, and I'll get vulnerable and share this with our audience because this feels like a safe space with our listeners, that I actually have had this come up in my own fertility journey. And now that some time has passed, I'm able to reflect on this and kind of understand what was going on. But I had this time where I had my first daughter and I was thinking about having another baby. And it seems silly when I say it out loud now, but this was really profound for me in the moment, that I was late for my oldest daughter's dental checkup. Like, she hadn't been to the dentist in maybe a little, over a year. And I was feeling a lot of guilt about that. And I told myself this whole story about, you don't deserve to have another baby because your first baby hasn't even been to the dentist on time. And I really wrapped myself up in this whole story about my abilities as a mother because of this one aspect of my parenting. And I know I'm not the only one who's done that. I know that so many of us attach these outcomes to our worthiness to be a parent, and we have to reframe our heart a little bit as we get ready, to get pregnant for the first time or to have another baby. So when I read that question in your book, I thought, wow, I have personally been in this place where I think my heart wasn't open because I had all these doubts about myself as a parent.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's so interesting because that obviously that's not true,
Right.
but your mind will still say things like that and like give you that, or that subconscious, it comes from somewhere, like maybe internally, or some kind of like being hard on ourselves. And we all are, aren't we, so hard on ourselves?
Oh,
And I'm included, like, I'm not immune. And probably this is why, I mean, nobody really gets into learning or writing about things if they haven't gone through that journey themselves.
right.
But yeah, that's what it is. It's like this being hard on ourselves, and talking about the heart. Really, that whole chapter was all about opening the heart. And it was the heart uterus connection, that ability. And I know that that was one of the questions that you were talking about, but it's really loving ourselves, mothering ourselves first.
Mothering ourselves first. Beautifully spoken. And now we have to dive into this heart uterus connection, because the first time you were on the show, you talked about this, and it was one of my first exposures to this concept. And I had to do some follow-up reading afterwards because I was so fascinated. For anyone who isn't familiar with the heart uterus connection, just give us a little primer on what that means to you.
Yes. So it's actually based on Chinese medicine. And there are two vessels that are deep within the body that are not really part of the acupuncture point vessels, although you could indirectly stimulate them or impact them. But there are two vessels that connect to the uterus. One connects from the kidneys, which the kidneys are really your reproductive, they hold the essence of your reproduction and the yin and the yang of your reproduction. And then there's one that connects to the heart. And so the heart has a very important role on the uterus. And on a side note, the heart also is considered to house the mind. And so the reason I'm saying this is it's all going to come together. So if you feel anxious, if you feel certain emotions, it can impact your heart energy, your heart chi. And if you are feeling any or you have any imbalance in the heart chi, it can impact how you feel as well. So it doesn't matter where it stems from, but it's basically like a two-sided thing. So it can start from the heart, it can start from the mind. The heart has a very important role on the uterus, and what it does is it actually has a role of opening the uterus. So it opens the uterus for the blood to come out for your period. And it also opens the uterus for the child to come out. And what's fascinating to me is I kind of dug into oxytocin, which is the love hormone, AKA. And a lot of research or a lot of information, or the more common information about it, is that it has a very important role on birthing, on labor. So when oxytocin goes up, like nipple stimulation, it'll contract the uterus. It basically, if you think about it, kind of has an impact on the uterus, interestingly enough. It's this connection, it's this hormone of connection and bonding. You would think of it as, heart hormone. So, the fact that it really does impact the uterus directly is fascinating. And then I think about the quote by Ina May Gaskin, which is the same energy that brings the baby in, brings the baby out. And then you start to read a little further and dig in, and I noticed that oxytocin raises after orgasm, and it also increases around ovulation. Interesting. Why would it do that? Could it have a role in conception? And isn't that interesting? Because the uterus opening can receive life in, right? Cervix opens around your ovulation, you have a little bit more of an opening. Obviously, the pH changes so that it's more receptive to bringing in and helping the sperm survive. So you wonder about that. So that was where I was like, that's interesting. That's almost like a scientific explanation of what Chinese medicine's been saying for a long time. But then also I think about things like heart math and the heart brain coherence, and that actually the heart and the brain are very much connected. And when they're coherent, people start to feel very pleasant emotions. They feel at ease, they feel peace. And when it becomes incoherent, they have anxiety. So I'm like, that's interesting. So like are our emotions impacting our heart? Yes, we know that. And could that also be playing a very major role in conception? So that was just a whole rabbit hole.
So fascinating to me. All of it is so interesting to me. And I just was doing a little bit of preliminary research for a presentation I gave a few weeks ago, talking about romance and conception and our hormones and how these things are all interconnected. I obviously don't have the acupuncture perspective, but there was one study. It was not a home run in terms of methodology by any means, but they did some hormone testing on this group of women looking at their follicle stimulating hormone and their luteinizing hormone. So obviously these are the hormones that are responsible for maturing a follicle in the ovary and then eventually triggering ovulation. And they asked the women about their romantic partnerships, and they found that the women who reported being in love had stronger surges of those gonadotropin hormones. And I thought,
So
okay,
cool.
there is clearly something that I want to read about more and investigate more. And then when I hear you talk, I just think that there's really something to this. And that whole quote about the what got the baby in was what will get the baby out. So I wanted to hear just a little bit from you about the role of love in conception. And maybe you've already covered this with the oxytocin and that whole connection, but energetically speaking, I think there's something really special and beautiful about love or romance or intimacy and connection being part of that preconception journey.
Yes. So I'm going to talk about love overall, and that doesn't necessarily have to be romance, but then I'm going to, of course, talk about that as well.
Yes.
So just in general, interestingly enough, like our minds are hardwired to have a negative bias, and that is for survival. So we will actually be a lot more triggered to buy under fear, watch something, remember news if it was fear-based, rather than something that comes from love. So just mentioning that. However, fear is going to impact our body in a certain way. And we could actually train ourselves to stay in a heightened sense and a heightened emotional, like good emotional, like positive emotions. And then negative emotions in general will drain you. You'll find if you feel really fear, if you experience any kind of fear, you are zapped out. Like, where does that energy go? Energy can never be destroyed. Where does it leave to? Like, but it definitely goes somewhere. And so away from you. And then when you feel really, really love and connection, you feel like energy's coming in. You feel this incredible energy. And as we know from the mitochondria that's in an egg cell, how important is energy when it comes to conception, right? And so conception needs a lot of energy. When we're at a deficit, whether under eating, over exercising, we know that it impacts our menstrual cycle and our reproductive health. So we know that, that's kind of like the energy, really how important energy is. And what's interesting is I'm a very big Joe Dispenza fan. Love, love, love what he does. I've been to two of his, or three actually. One was a little shorter, three of his retreats, in-person retreats. And he has a whole group of researchers sitting in the back the whole time. And they are studying probably about half their participants. And it's about an 1,800 person event. So about half of them they're very intrigued because it's part of the whole thing as he talks about his findings, and they check microbiome. Okay. So they see actually people coming in and they look at the microbiome afterwards, and the microbiome is way more diverse. And then they have we have certain chemicals in our blood that are inhospitable to cancer. So they're basically toxic to cancer, and it's kind of like our defense. And they find with cancer patients, they start out with it very low and they end up with it very high at the end. And they start to look at the brain scans and how the brains operate. They look at hormones and chemicals and endorphins, and it's incredible, incredible. And they were seeing even people who are like novice meditators, never done it before in their life, but a huge impact. And so they're really looking at everything. And of course, questionnaire, and they follow them afterwards as well. And all of that. So one of the things really deduced from it, because they're trying to figure out, they have these scientists that are, some of them are not even into this. They actually met Joe and he's like, why don't you come on my team and just check it out? And they were very skeptical at first because they were like, what is this? And so it's interesting because he has one of his scientists that is always speaking. He's fascinating. But he said, I've never, like in my own life, I would have never looked into this. It wouldn't have seemed like something that would make a difference. So he's seeing this from a research perspective, and he's blown away, and he's trying to make sense of it. And he's trying to see like, what exactly is it? What's the magic formula and whatever it is. And they don't even call it a meditation because it's a very unique process. They call it like the WTF is this kind of thing. Like it's basically its own weird thing. They are trying to figure out, like really deduce it, like what is the formula? What's the magic thing about this? And so their, I guess, hypothesis or like idea is that when you take thought and combine it with heightened emotion, that is when you're able to create things. and they're saying that people's bodies are literally, from what they're seeing, are completely changed, that they have things going on without taking medicine. They have like chemicals in their body and they don't know, how does this all of a sudden appear? How does this all of a sudden happen? Like, it's almost like they have become a new person. And so he talks about this energetic. I hope I'm not getting on too much of a tangent, but he talks a lot about focusing on the energy of the heart and feeling the love. And so that's where I'm going to with this, is that energy with the love, that's sort of the magic secret ingredient. So when people do affirmations and feel like it doesn't work, it's because they're only saying the words, but they're not matching that energy. So when you actually elevate that energy and I remember actually when I met you for the first time, you know what struck me about you, besides the fact that you're super smart? You were writing a gratitude journal, and like every word that came out of you were so grateful. You're like, I'm just so grateful. And I'm like, oh my God, I love her. Like, you were just had such gratitude and you were so in your gratitude. And so gratitude is one of the ways that we are able to open our heart, because by affirming our gratitude, we're basically saying that we have, and we can find anything to be grateful for. We could just, the fact that we're breathing or we can hear is an amazing thing, because not everybody can do that as easily without machines, or, you know what I mean? There's all kinds of things that we can find. And so he talks about that elevated state of being, and how that combined with a thought, and especially if they are in coherence, that shifts basically your physical manifestation, like your physical expression, and pretty much your genetic, whatever, I guess the way your genes would operate. And so I guess, what was I going to say? I lost my thought. We're talking about the material. Oh, so yes. So this goes back to another thing that I talk about in the book, is connecting to this divine intelligence that we all have. And once we have that, it's really it creates order in our body, and order is really like aligned with health, whereas disorder is aligned with dis-ease. And so it's connecting to that awareness and that order that we have. And when you have that, and then you're coming from this place of love and receptivity, you're allowing things in.
I am so into everything that you're saying. It's so fascinating. And thank you for bringing up my gratitude journal experience. I mean, how you're saying, when you're doing these practices, you can't just say the words. It's so easy for me to be like, oh, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful to do this work. But I have to feel it. And that's why I'm a vision board person too. So I can see it. I can feel it. I can use my imagination. And now my gratitude practice has evolved to this place where I call it a gratitude rampage.
I
I
love it.
go on a gratitude rampage, and it just takes 10 minutes, and you kind of write down in your journal all these things that you're grateful for, but then you feel it. Like a recent example is our podcast recently just celebrated its 1 year anniversary, which I'm so grateful for. But
Awesome.
the listeners of this show have heard me talk about our show's producer, Paola Martini, who's so amazing. And so when I go on my gratitude rampage, you don't just say like, I'm grateful for Paola. I think about the way that I feel so supported by her and the way that she's made my dreams come true. And you actually think about the specifics and feel it. And I think that's really relevant to what you're saying, whether it's a health outcome you want, or a goal you're working towards, or a behavior change. You think about what it would feel to have that be yours, right?
Yeah. And a
Wow.
lot of times I think, it's the same thing with life in general. Like, is what you say in alignment to what you really truly feel? And so really kind of making that alignment, and then also connecting it to what you choose, that you do have a choice.
Right. Yes. Okay. I'm loving the heart uterus connection. And we probably could do a whole episode, but people will have to check out the book to read more about that. Um, I, I want to shift gears a little bit, because now that we're on memory lane talking about our time and our experiences together, One of in our early stages of our friendship, I was learning so much about circadian rhythm from you, and I had a small child, and I was trying to figure out my own circadian rhythm, and you were posting all this content about, when you should exercise during the day and really honoring those patterns, and it got me thinking and kind of opened up this new awareness for me. And you talk about circadian rhythm in your book. And like I said, you've talked about this for years. Will you give us just some quick pro tips that you work with your clients of how do you realign to these circadian rhythms when we're busy and we're working and we're on the computer late at night? Like, what are some of your pro tips?
Okay, so I'll think about how I talk to my friends or my clients in New York City in the winter. So I'll
Exactly.
give you that. Okay, so some of the things include, obviously we want to have some connections with nature, and if you can't have the outdoor nature, get some plants. Having some life in the life force from plants in the apartment is wonderful. It makes you happy. There's a psychological component to that. And then also if you grounding is actually another big one that I always talk about. And it does also help our circadian rhythm. And do what I have. I have a grounding mat here, right here as I'm sitting. And so you can get a grounding mat if you're in a city and you just don't have the option to really go and find a park to put your feet on. So have a grounding mat. Just don't use it when it's lightning. That's like the only time that I get like a little bit more, fearful about that. It could be fine, but I just always say, just don't use it when it's lightning. But yeah, you can ground your feet. Just put anything of your body on it and you're already getting grounded. So that's one of the ways. And then another thing is you can take a light box and buy it on Amazon. They have a bunch of them, and get a light box to have next to you on your computer. Now, you don't want to look directly on it, but you want it almost like to look like it's a window right next to you. It's been shown to help with seasonal affective disorder. So it really helps your circadian rhythm. And the reason why is because we are hardwired to sync up with nature through light and many other things, but light is a big one. So light definitely impacts us. And you think about light, I mean, light impacts nature in general. And also getting moonlight. That's another thing. So moonlight, we're supposed to get moonlight. And it does also, interestingly enough, I do see my patients all syncing up with the same phase of the moon. It's nuts. I'll see 5 different people on the same day saying they got their period, and it's like a new moon. So I do see that. Or a full moon. Sometimes people sync up with the full moon. So getting that moonlight if you can, even just like looking outside at night and trying to get it. Ideally, you wouldn't have a lot of other artificial light, but you can't always control that. But still, looking at the moon, kind of even connecting energetically. And then at night, before you go to sleep, some of the things that you could do is you can buy, if you absolutely have to be on your computer or on a device, then get blue light blockers or put it on night mode. And because, obviously we have to be realistic. Some people are still going to be on the devices, and that's fine. Just do it in a way that let's compromise, like basically put blue light blockers. So that's going to help. And basically are not sunglasses, they're glasses that you can get from Amazon, and they basically block out the blue light. The blue light is the light that we usually get in the morning that makes us feel like it's morning. And then try to dim the lights in your home a couple of hours before going to sleep. If you have to have lights, it's actually been shown if you keep them lower, then the mind doesn't feel like it's like the sun up high in the sky. So that's kind of a way around it. Or you can have them dim, walk around with the blue light blockers. And then a couple of hours before you go to sleep, you can do things like massage your feet, take a warm bath, maybe have some chamomile tea, something to really calm your system, your nervous system, and ease yourself. So it's almost like you're courting your body into sleep. And when you do that every single day, you're going to also cause melatonin to rise at night if you're getting that daylight in the morning. So your body knows, okay, now it's nighttime. And then try to keep your bedroom completely dark at night.
I love a luxurious bedtime routine.
Oh,
Everything you're
yeah.
saying sounds so lovely. We're courting ourselves before bed. I absolutely love that. This is great. You take all these rules, and then I say your bedroom's super, super dark, and it's for sleep, sex, and relaxation only. Like, this isn't the place where we're
Exactly.
in there filing our taxes and watching
No
the
TV.
No TV. That's not what the bedroom is for.
Oh, and please don't watch the news. You don't need that bad energy before you go to sleep, because your subconscious mind is so open to suggestion around that time too. So it's like, you don't want to have those nightmares.
No, we're just
You want to
relaxing.
feel safe.
We want to feel safe in all areas, especially for our fertility.
Yeah.
Michelle, I am so proud and impressed with your book. I mean, it's really a work of art. And like I said, I know that you poured so much of your personal and clinical experience into these pages. Is there something, a message or a takeaway or some theme that you hope readers will take away after they finish the book? I think that's a wonderful place for us to close today. Is your intention as the author for how this book will serve the reader?
Oh, wow. I mean, the first word that comes to mind is empowerment. I just want you to realize how freaking powerful you are. You have an ability to do so much more than you've been taught to believe. And so that's, if anything, I think that with the research and some of the things and examples that I show, I just want you to realize that you're powerful. And I also believe that when people have a calling to have a baby, that's real. It's not imagined. It's not fake. It's not something out of like nowhere. It's not a pipe dream. It's real. There's an urge, there's a reason, and there's a connection, and it's in the intelligence, kind of like that intelligent soup is calling you for a reason. So hold on to that. I am also a product of secondary infertility, and my mom really fought for me to be here, and she knew in her heart, and she did not give up. She could have given up many times. My dad didn't really want another baby. So it was really like something that she felt very strongly for. And she listened to the calling after her struggles. And here I am. So I just kind of wanted to mention that.
Beautiful. Here you are on your mission, living in your meaning and purpose. And I think it's only fitting that I go on a gratitude rampage to end today's episode. So, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing all of these insights and everything that you have brought to the table in terms of your own experience is just, I think, like you said, really going to empower your readers. So I'm so grateful to spend time with you and to have you share of those. To our show's producer, Paola Martini, so much gratitude.
Yay!
To our listeners. Thank you so much for choosing this show as a trusted source of information. We look forward to reading your book, Michelle. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Did you love this episode and want to hear more? Head over to drkaleawattles.com/podcast, where you can find more episodes on all things fertility.